All right. All right, welcome back. I believe we've graded most of you, so you should be up to date up to assignment 3. Blackboard. Did you check? See if it's there? It's there. You could check. Most of you did fantastic. So I wasn't expecting anything else. It's great. Thank you. There's still a few of you that we haven't been able to grade because we don't have the tag in the in GitHub. There's just a couple of you that we haven't been able to get to. So please go back into GitHub and tag it as and you should be all working on the next assignment, right, which is the security assignment, which is basically adding PassportJS support to the assignment. And someone pointed out that you might be using Passport also for your project, and so Passport can only be configured once, right? So one for the project. So I'll look into that and suggest a solution. So you can use Passport from several places, from several web services. Passport needs to, when it's configured, needs to be a singleton that can then be used in several places. So I'll suggest what to do. I didn't run into that issue before. I was always using only one singleton. So anyway, so we finished Mongo last. Let's see, like we finished MongoDB 2 weeks ago. We started Passport last week. Let's look at our agenda. Let's see where we are, and we should be finishing up. Should be finishing up security and user management today. So yeah, so the Passport assignment went out last week, right? And it's due not this Friday, but the following Friday. And then soon after that, the week after, would be the project would be due. Okay, so you have what, 2-3 weeks to finish up your project. So you should be feverishly working on your project. I would focus the next couple of weeks just polishing on what you have. Don't start adding more features. Don't increase whatever you have. Just stick to whatever features you already have. Just make sure that they work correctly. That your the look and feel is strong. Make sure that the backgrounds are not. That you can read. What some of you have come to me and it's hard to read what you have. Make sure that there's good contrast pieces, that things are flush, they're nicely aligned, that it looks finished. Okay. So the prototype, you have to do a lot of look and feel, right? You're just trying it out to see if it works, right? In the final project, it should really be polished. Right? So I'll be focusing a lot on just seeing that that looks very professional. Also, make sure that that it looks good on a smaller screen. That's one of the first things that I'll do. I'll start resizing your application, making sure that things that shouldn't wrap are not wrapping. Okay, make sure that you try it out. You actually try it on a phone, right? That it might look great on a small screen on a desktop, but actually visit your website on a phone. Just make sure that it looks okay. Also see how it transitions as you move slowly. No weird wrapping at any point, right? Or things are not growing at a proportion that shouldn't be growing, right? So so make sure that you test that out. And the requirements were set from the beginning, right? 2 types of users. All the different types of relationships, right? One to many, many-to-many, a user with another user, relationship with another user, a relationship of one user with its domain object, a domain object related to another domain object, right? So we'll be looking for those kinds of relationships that you have those 5 types of pages, right? The home page, a search page, a results page, a details page. Those that are doing special projects, your requirements are slightly different. So I guess it'll be a little more subjective, but it's whatever we agreed on, right? Whatever we agreed on when you describe the project to me. Also, there is no final presentation. Like, you don't have to present anything to me, but we talked about this early on in the course, that I'll need a 5 to 20-minute video of you demoing your project, right? So I don't want you to talk about the design or just for you to show off the features of your project. Making sure that when I'm looking at it, that I'm not going to miss any feature. Just go through the basics. You could do this, you could do that, and if you click here, you go there. So just show it off, right? Just you using your project, okay? It shouldn't be shorter than 5 minutes. It shouldn't be longer than 20 minutes, okay? And so that will be part of your submission, right? And the link to your video should be available on your homepage. So from your homepage, I should be able to go to your GitHub. I should be able to navigate to your project page. I should be able to go to all of your assignments. I should be able to see your project proposal, your documents, right? I should be able to see the video. Homepage of your when you first go to OpenShift, website, that's the first thing that we should see, right? Links to all these places, right? And your homepage should look spectacular. I see that at least most of you already have very pretty websites, but there are still a few of you that you haven't even started in your homepages. Okay, so I would get going. Homepage is 5% of the grade, right? So please get going. All right, it should look spectacular. I should be very, very proud and to share this link with your potential employers. Right? If you ask for a resume, if you ask for a reference, I will definitely copy and paste this. I should feel comfortable with copying and pasting this URL in that email, or redirecting your potential employer to that website, saying, look what I can do. All right. Okay, so let's get back. Let me see if I'm recording. Yes, I'm recording. Yes. So we started on PassportJS last week, and we introduced the local strategy to be able to log in using just plain old username and password. I'd like to talk about today being able to integrate with other third-party authentication authorities, such as Google or Facebook or Twitter. Also, another thing that we need to do is that we notice that when we are creating the users, we're storing the password in clear text, right? And so we need to go back and refactor this so that when we use the local strategy, we have to make sure to store that password in an encrypted form, right? So that even admins shouldn't be able to look at our password, right? And to pass us ourselves. So passwords should never be stored in clear text, right? So I'd like to show you how we can do that as well, right? Also, have asked me for some demos on how to work with WYSIWYG editors and Autocomplete and several features that you're working on your project. So I have some demos here that I have to show you that you should be able to hopefully reuse in your own projects. Okay, I'd like to share that with you as well. All right, so let's get started. So I kept working on the project that I've been demoing for the last couple of weeks, the web app maker application, and last week I showed you how to use the local strategy to log in using username and password. Since then, I've added the capability of logging in using Google or Facebook. Okay. So now I can register as a username with username and password. I can register myself as Google or Facebook, and I can have 3 separate accounts, three separate identities. A nice feature to have would be to be able to merge all these identities into one. Right? I haven't done that, but typically this is very typical, right? If you log in using Google, you have one identity. If you log in as Facebook, you have a completely different identity. And this is the way it's implemented. If I go and click on Google, notice that it logs me in immediately. It didn't challenge me. Right? And this is because Google, when you authenticate the first time, it gives you back a token. Right? That Passport uses it in its session and its database to go back to Google every time and says, hey, is this token still good? And Google will respond either yes or no. If it's yes, then Google won't challenge us to authenticate ourselves. Right? It immediately comes back and says, yes, this is the user, and this is the profile information for that user. If the token is no good, it's either because it says timed out or you've cleared the session and I don't have a token, right? Then Google would challenge us. So to start an incognito session that doesn't remember anything about me, and we'll visit again localhost. So here I am again. If I click on Google, because I don't have a token, right? Passport doesn't have a token to give to Google. Then Google challenges us, right? It says, okay, well, I need to know who you are. So I'm gonna log in with right, and it's asking me, it says, "Is this you?" And I sign in, and Google warns me that saying, "Hey, this application, which happens to be my application, wants to know something about you." Right? It's asking for profile information. It's asking for email. Are you okay with that? Right? And it says, "Yeah, sure. I wrote the application. I might be okay with it, but somebody else who's..." I allow, and then it logs me in. Right? Now below in the homepage, if you notice, I have a logout button over here. Now this logout is not log me out of, right? It's log me out of Passport. Right? Meaning have Passport forget about me. Right? Any of that session information, forget about it. So we're logging out of Passport, not Google. There's no way of formally logging out of Google since you have any number of devices that are connected to your Google account, right? Your phone, your tablet, your Chrome. It would be very unrealistic to be able to log out of everything and say, no, this person doesn't exist anymore. Right? You have to be challenged in every single device, right? So Facebook would work if I use Facebook. Again, same thing. Facebook works similar to Google, where you're challenged if you don't have a token. And you're provided with a token that you can then use to go back and see if you're still logged in. And so I don't remember my Facebook. I haven't used Facebook so long. Chrome remembers. All right, and then it comes back with a response. So the way both of them work is that so Passport is going to ask us to register first with Google, right? I mean, as a developer, as an application developer, right? We're going to ask us to register first with Google. Then Google will as the developer, we need to tell Google and Facebook that, hey, we're building this web application, right? That is going to try to authenticate with you. So Google says, okay, well, let me know something about these applications, right? Where is it being hosted, right? And what is the domain that this application is being hosted? And also Google and Facebook need to be able to notify us back with a success or failure, whether you were able to log in or not, because we're not doing authentication, right? In the local strategy, we were doing the authentication. We were getting the username and password. We were looking up the username and password in the database to see if this person existed. It's no longer going to be our responsibility. It's going to be Google's responsibility, right? What's going to happen is that the request to log in through Google is going to come to us in the server, right, by clicking these buttons, right? And then the server being hosted at our particular IP address is going to then proxy and go out. It's not going from the browser. It's not the browser who is requesting to log into Google. The browser is the server, and the server then goes out to Google, right? Because Google, we need to tell Google that the logging is coming from a particular domain. It needs to come from our server, right? If it's your OpenShift server, you need to register that IP address or that domain and say, hey, the request is coming from this domain, right? Because that's part of the security, right? Google wants to make sure that the requests are coming from the right place, right? And that the communication is with that domain, right? And the domain, we own the domain, right? It's our OpenShift domain. It's our local server domain. Yes, we own that, right? So we need to register that with Google and Facebook. To register it, we go to in Google. It would be Google API Console. Google API Console. If you go there, this is where you can register your application. Okay? First of all, in the overview, this allows you to manage all the various Google APIs that are available there. You can turn them on so that you can programmatically access information from these. Handle all that, right? All the various APIs that are available. The other one is this one, the credentials, right? I'm not going to click it because if I click it, it's going to reveal a lot of private information, a lot of my client ID, my secrets, everything is going to be listed there if I click on that. So I'm not going to click on it, but you will to be able to set, if you want to set it up, you'll need to go here, click there, and it'll ask you what authentication do you want. Okay? In our case, we're going to be using OAuth authentication. Okay, so it'll ask you, what is it? Is it an Android? What is it? Like, is it a phone application? Is it a website? You say it's a website, and it'll ask you, okay, well, what kind of authentication do you want? It'll be OAuth authentication. After that, it'll ask you, well, what's the name of the application? What are you calling it? You can give it whatever name you want. CS5610. And then it'll ask you for two more things. One is, where are you making the request from? What's the IP address or the domain name? Where are you coming from? Right now, because I'm running on my local machine, I set http://127.0.0.1 :3000. You need to port 2. So if you want to try it on your machine, you would do the same thing. Localhost 127.0.0.1 :3000. The other thing that it'll ask you is, okay, fine, I'll be expecting the request to come from that domain, right? And only from that domain. That's part of the security. The other part is that, okay, once I am able to identify this person, how do I notify you back that this person has successfully authenticated? So you have to provide another URL where your server is going to be expecting a response back. Okay, and so that's the URL that Google is going to go back and say, okay, well, here it is. Here's the profile information. It's going to call. It's going to make a request, a GET request. It's going to pass us profile information, that user's first name, last name, email, whatever we asked for, and whatever we agreed on. Okay, And so we need to provide that, right? In my case, it's again going to be HTTP 127.0.0.1 3000, right? And then a path in my Node.js, and I need to be listening for that incoming request. Make sense? Right? I have pictures of this. I will post the pictures, but with my information hidden. Okay, I'll post pictures of what it looks like, but it's not hard. So I encourage all of you to play around with it and set it up at least locally, right? Just to play around with it. Okay, I've done that already. On Facebook, it's similar. Okay. And so you would go to developers.facebook.com. And you would click here where it says My Apps. My Apps. Okay. Again, if I click on that, it'll show all my apps, all my IDs, all my everything, right? But Facebook doesn't call them client ID and client secret. Excuse me. Google does that. Google calls those two values, Google client ID and the client secret, right? And Facebook, I think they're called ID and application clients ID or something like that, right? But they are the equivalent, right? It's two letters and some tokens that you need to copy. You copy them over. Okay, so what do you do with these values? What do you do with these values? Well, you need to tell Passport. You need to tell Passport, hey Passport, here's a client ID, here's a secret ID, right? And here's a callback. You need to configure Passport. Because it is Passport who's going to make the request to Google or Facebook. I'm trying to authenticate this person, and here's the information that you need. Authenticate it, and then let me know. And call me back at this URL. Okay? And you let me know. But this information in Passport, to tell Passport, you wouldn't want to put this information in clear text in your source code. Okay, because your source code typically will end up being, either shared or it's going to be either in some visual and some source control, right? Maybe in a public place. So ideally, you will want to put them in, wherever the machine, wherever the server is running, right? Put it in an environment variable. Okay, so that's what I did. I put it in environment variables and then from within your server, you can load those environment variables to configure Passport. Okay. I'll show you the source code that will configure this. I also made it available in the portal. Where's the portal? So here's the portal. If you go to security. Down below, tells you a little bit on how to configure this, right? That you need to npm install Passport, the local strategy. This is what we looked at last week, right? So if you want to have it documented here, please feel free to take a look at that. What to do on the server.js, what to do on the service side, okay? I also documented down below how to integrate with Google Authentication, right? So you'll need to install a couple of this. You should already have installed from last week. You should have already installed Passport. So it would be install Passport -- save and Google OAuth, right? Or Facebook OAuth as well. Okay. Don't forget the -- save. Right. That's going to add that module as a dependency in your package JSON file. Okay. I see a lot of posts on Kata saying, "Oh, it works locally, but it's not working on my OpenShift." Right. And for those of you who have come to see me with this problem, usually has been as simple as updating your package JSON file. Okay, remember, package JSON file is what OpenShift uses to install all your packages. If it's not listed there, OpenShift will not know that it needs to install those packages, right? So I usually add everything with a -- save option, okay, and then usually that fixes the problem. Okay? So first make sure that it's in your package JSON. There they are. Okay, make sure that they're there. Then in your login page, we'll want a button. We want a button with a Google. Okay, and there it is. So this is just an anchor that uses this href. You see this href? It says OAuth/Google. Right. Notice that this is a relative path. Right. It's a path that is being handled by our own server. Right. We're going to write the web service endpoint that's going to answer to this, right? And that's where we're going to generate the request to Google, right? Because the request needs to come from the server. It can't come from the browser. Remember, the browser is downloading our HTML, in who knows what machine, right? With who knows what IP address, okay? But the request has to come from our server, the domain that we register with Google. Yes. So this hyperlink is going to go to our server. There it is. So now because it's an anchor, it's a get, right? It's going to be a get that goes to our server. So we better create a get event handler on an HTTP handler on the server side. Also, you'll notice that I used this icon. Right? This icon, it's from, see that FA? So Font Awesome is a line fonts, right, that has tons and tons of really cool fonts that you should be familiar with. It's very, very common to use Font Awesome in web development projects. So I definitely encourage you to go and take a look at the icons that are available. There's just tons of them. Okay, and these are scalable, so you can make them as big as small as you want, right? So they're for any size screen. They're great, and they're categorized, for automobiles and anchors and trains and credit cards and just whatever you can think of, right? Right. So what I did is I loaded that library in your index page. So in the index page, I just added this link, right? That loads the CSS for Font Awesome. This just adds the F for Facebook or the G+ for Google. It just makes it looks a little prettier. So on the server side, right? In our case, it would be our web service, right? In our case, it would be either the user.service.server.js, right? Wherever you're doing the login stuff, right? Wherever you're handling all this login. And last week is wherever we were handling all the local strategy, right? In that same file, right? We're going to require the passport module and the various strategies, right? In this case, we're going to load now the Google strategy. Right? Once you have the Google strategy, we need to create an object that is going to hold all the secrets, right? All these tokens that we copied from Google, right? In the dashboard, Google's dashboard, when we're creating the application, right? We created all these clients, secrets and whatnot, right? And we copied those long strings, and we should have created environment variables, right? So that's what I did. I created environment variables. And on a Mac, it would be in your bash file, in your .bash_profile. Right? If you open that up, you can add an export and then the name of the environment variable equal, and then whatever Google gave you. Right? Paste it in there. You'll need to restart the terminal or restart WebStorm for it to read the environment variables, aware of these environment variables. On a PC, I don't know. I think you have in your preferences. You can create your environment variables as well. Anyway, so from within Node.js, all those environment variables are available through this namespace, process.env, right? So process.env gives you access to all your environment variables, right? So you can read them in. Okay, you should copying and pasting sensitive information into your source code. Okay, it's dangerous. Other people can be reading this and take advantage of these passwords and these keys. All right. All right. So here's the get. Right. Here's the get coming from our button. Right. Our button. Right. If you remember, it was a hyperlink that came to our server. Right. And the button had href/auth/Google. There it is. We're listening for that button click, but we're listening where? On the server. We're not listening. It's not going through Angular. It's not going through Angular. We could go through Angular, right? We could have had a button that has an ng click, that has a security service, client service, right? And then from there we could have generated a get. We could have done that. Maybe that might have been cleaner, right? But then there'll be quite a bit of hops, right? It would be from our HTML, for our JavaScript, for our server. Right? We skipped over and we just went directly to the server. Okay. Anyway, here we're saying that we want to authenticate using Google. Right? This is what's going to generate the call to Google. Right? It's going to redirect our browser. It's going to redirect to the URL where Google authenticates. And it's going to pass all this information to Google. It's going to pass all this information to Google. It says, hey, this person is to authenticate with this application. Here's the ID of that application. Here's a secret, right? Here's a callback URL, right? It's passing it. If I demo it to you again, you'll notice that. Right? So if I go to another incognito and I do it again. Click on Google, you'll notice, oh, it remembers me. I need to clear my cache, I guess. Oh, I don't want to clear my cache. Wait, let me see if I start another one. If I close all of those. Okay, challenges me. So if you'll notice, that's the information, right? That is going out to Google. Some of it is publicly available. It's okay that it's in clear text, right? You'll notice that part of that information is the callback. Where's the callback? Okay, this is, so it says redirect URI, HTTP 127 OAuth. So we're telling Google, when you're done authenticating, this is where we want to receive a callback from you. Okay, and this URL has to match exactly to what we configured when we created the application in Google. But it has to match exactly. Right? So don't add extra paths. Okay. The name of the don't add if you use HTTP or HTTPS or whatever you use exactly the same whatever you told it. It's gonna do a comparison, a string comparison. It has to match exactly, right? Okay, so we're sending that. Also, notice that we're telling Google that we want profile information and email information. Okay, that was configured here. be in the scope. Okay, so this scope, right, it's a mechanism that Google uses to partition the information that is shared with others, right? And then we can granularly, very granularly decide what is that we want to share. And you might, from the API console, you might say that I don't want to share anything. I want to be completely anonymous. Or I want to share my profile information, my username, my email, okay? But I don't want to share any of my photos. I don't want to share any of my contacts. So you can really configure the granularity of what is that you want to share, right? And that's profile based. Each profile can decide what they want to share. So that's why we got challenged. It says, hey, this application wants to know this about you. Are you okay with that? It's allowed. Right? But yeah, so scope, it says we are asking for the profile information and email. And there's a whole bunch of very well-defined scopes, Google scopes that you can provide here, these strings that you can provide what to ask for. Okay, so this is going to generate that request to Google. I'm going to go out to Google. I'm going to redirect you to log in. If it has a token, it'll provide the token. Right? If the token is good, we're going to come back right away. If the token is no good, it's going to challenge us. Okay. And the way Google comes back to us saying that it's good or not, to the response URL, here's the response URL. So this is where my server is running, and here's the path, auth Google callback. Right? That's what I configured when I registered my application. Right? I configured that. Right? So Google says, okay, fine, that's where I'm going to call you back. Right? Your server better be ready to receive that incoming request from Google, and indeed we. Right, so we are registering a GET request, my handler, ready to receive the response from Google. See that? So this one is coming from the browser when they clicked on the button. That request is coming from the browser to our server, whereas this one is coming from Google to our server. So we're listening for these incoming requests with these URL patterns. We don't care where they come from, right? They're GETs, they're GET requests. We're just listening for that incoming GET. One is coming from the browser, one is coming back from Google. And here we can configure Passport. Says, I'm going to have Passport handle these requests, right? Passport, browser, and Google, and then from Google back to the server. Yes? And we can configure, it says, okay, again, use Google. And if it's successful, I'm going to redirect to this URL, which happens to be an Angular, right? It's an Angular formatted URL. Right, that's going to be what's my index page, right? Which is going to do the views and the ng views, and it'll load everything, blah blah blah, right? And it's going to put me where? In the profile. What does the profile do? It's going to come back to see me if I'm logged in, right? That's the first thing that's going to come back, right? Anyway, so we need to log me in. I'm not logged in yet, right? I'm logged in with Google. Google says okay. Google just came back saying it exists. Right? My PassportJS hasn't logged me in yet. It only knows that I exist, or that Google said I exist, right? Up to this point. So where do we do that? The logging in. So first of all, so if it's not successful, right? If Google said no, I don't know who that person is. Right? I have no idea who that person is. Right? Then I'm going to respond with a failure. And I'm going to send you back to the login page. Anyway, so how do we handle Passport logging us in? Right? We need to tell Passport that yes, this person is good, right? Because remember, we're maintaining two things, right? One, we're not looking up username and password. That's Google's responsibility. But Passport needs to know about us too, right? So to do that, just like we configured the local strategy, right, by giving it a function, a callback, right? We do similar configuring the Google strategy. We say passport.use, and we give it an instance of the Google strategy. This is where we use this is where we provide the configuration, right? The client ID, the secret, the URL. This is where it all starts, right? Where it gets initialized, right? And we also provide a function, a callback function, where we're going to be notified that it was successful, right? We want to be notified, right? Programmatically, so that we can, we can store information about this user in the database, right? So we can cache some information about this user in the database, right? So this Google strategy is called after this is handled. So this is the callback that comes back from Google with success or failure, right? With success or failure. If it's successful, the Google strategy will call me at this function, which is this. This is my notification from Google that it's all good. You are authenticated. I know who you are. Okay, and here we can do whatever we want, right? We can do whatever we want. What we're going to do is that we're going to store some information, because part of the callback from Google is that it provides useful information, such as first name and last name, email, right? We don't need to ask them for email anymore, right? Because it comes from Google, right? That is the email, right? Any other information that might be in the profile, a picture, your account picture in Google, we can use that, right? As part of the profile picture. Your gender, date of birth. It depends. Whatever you actually share in your account. If you're not sharing anything, the only thing that you'll get is the ID, right? The unique identifier for this user, right? This is a primary key that Google uses to uniquely identify each one of us, right? And that's the only thing that, the minimal thing that it would share with us, right? In our case, in my Google Plus account, I said that I want to share my profile, my photo, and my email. That's fine. My first name and last name. So all that information is passed to us in this profile object, right? Now this profile object is almost the same across different authentications, right? If I use Facebook, this profile object would be almost the same, but not quite. It's a little bit different from one authentication provided from others, right? Most of it is the same, right? But there's a few quirks here and there. So you would have a different callback configured for different providers. Okay, so here we're just doing Google. So what we're going to do is that this profile information, I want to cache it. I want to store somewhere that I already have a first name, I already have a last name, I already have a gender, I have a picture. I want to store it somewhere, right? So I'm going to store it in my user model, right, which is connected to Mongoose. Right? Mongoose is going to have a data model. And first I'm going to check to see if it already exists. Now, what uniquely identifies this person is being Google, being a Google user is the unique identifier, Google's ID, primary key. Right? And that's what I'm going to use to uniquely identify this person. Okay? So I'm going to first search for the person to see if it's already there. Right? I'm going to take the profile and the ID in the profile, and we'll see if does this Google person already exist in my database. Right? If they do exist, right, it's going to return a user object, and I'm going to tell Passport this is the currently logged in user, right? And how do we do that? the same way we did in we just say done, right? Null, no error, and then the user. And now Passport makes a note that this is the currently logged in user. The currently logged in user. Okay? It creates all the cookies and the session information and all that. All the other functionality, such as is authenticated, is now it works. .login works. .logout works. Right. Request that user works. Right. All those Passport additional functions and objects in the request are available. They're the same. They behave exactly the same way. Local strategy. Okay, it's in the session already. The cookies it's encrypted and whatnot. All those things happen the same way. Okay, if the user doesn't exist, well, they better exist. They should exist, right? Because Google said they exist, right? So if Google says I exist, I must exist. So I'm going to insert the user into my local database. The profile. I start grabbing information from the profile. Again, this schema, the schema of the profile, is not the same for for Facebook than it is for Google, right? So you have to look at what comes back from Google, right? And just print out the object in the console, right? And just take a look at what comes back, right? Or see it in the request response. For instance, the email is part of several emails. That is an array of emails, right? The first email is my personal email, right? It's my main primary email. Right? That's my giannunzi at gmail.com. Okay, so I grab that. Also, I want to use that. I chose my choice. I'll take the first part of my email as my username. Okay, this is somewhat dangerous, right? Because somebody using local strategy might have logged in using, right? I would have to do some validation, right? So that's the thing about, well, what's unique? Perhaps I just should have used just the email as my username, and that's it, right? But this is the complexity and the challenge that a lot of these services run into when you have many accounts for the same user. And then, well, how do you want to merge it? What username would you end up with? Is it the email? Is it the username that you created earlier? Who are you? How do you want to be known? Right? What about all these accounts? Right? How do you merge all this information? Yeah, don't get me started with many iTunes accounts and trying to merge any of that. What a mess. So anyway, I decided that I'll take the username, my Google email. I decided that that's going to be just basically my username, and that's it. Okay. So I create a new object whose username is going to be the first part of my email. So it's just going to be giannunzi, right? Another thing in the profile in Google is the name. So the name in Google has two parts, right? The first name and last name, right? You can grab those. So I populate my already existing fields in my schema, right? In my user schema, in my developer schema. I populate those. I populate the email as the email that I grabbed earlier, and I create under the same schema, right? I create a new attribute, a new property here that is going to store things that are specific to Google, the Google identity, right? I'm going to store the ID that came in the profile, and I'm also going to store the token, right? This is going to be used later by Passport, right? To look up. It's still good. Okay, I'm going to cache it in my database. Right. So finally, when I have all the information, finally I store the data in the database. right? The user is created in the database, right? Okay, if there's an error, oh, I'm sorry. Once it gets created, notice that I return. So that's going to be handled in the next then. There it is, in the next then. And finally, if that user is successfully created into the database, right, I log them in. Right, now they are logged in. Right, they're made in the session and the cookies and this and all that. Right. If there's an error, I just return done error. Make sense? Everybody good? Okay. All right. Facebook is similar. Let me just quickly show you. I didn't copy it. It's just so similar. So the Facebook is very, very similar, but it's a different strategy, right? It's a Facebook strategy, right? And it's a instantiated require passport Facebook dot strategy. You have a question?
When we are creating the user,
yeah,
at that time only we are inserting the token. If token gets changed or reset, then
it would challenge us again. The server.
But the user will still exist in the database, right?
Yes. Yep.
So you are
but every time
the token.
I'm sorry.
You are not updating the token.
If you mean if
the user is actually available in the database.
Yep.
And you
yeah, we need to update it. Yes, we need to update it. Yep. We need to update it. So here's the Facebook strategy. And just like we had for the Google button, right, that we have on the clients, we have similar for the Facebook button. Right? We have a Facebook button. When we click on that, we're going to go through this end, right, off Facebook. And the scope is that we only want the email. We're only asking for the email, although it's going to give us more than that. And we configure the from Facebook, just like we did with Google. Right. So again, this is when we authenticated when we added ourselves to Facebook. We asked for the client ID for the client secret. Facebook does not ask you to register with the domain. It doesn't ask you to register with the callback URL. Right. So it's as Google is. Like Google wants to make sure that it's coming from the right domain, right? And when it calls you, that it's calling the right URL. Facebook doesn't care. Facebook says, I don't care where the callback is coming from. If it's a phone or if it's a tablet or a desktop or whatever, I don't care where it's coming from. And the URL, you just have to pass it to me in the request, right? And that's the URL I'm going to call back, right? But it's not going to do an extra check to see if that URL that you're giving it matches with the URL that was registered with the API. Right? Just passed along in the request. So the same thing as earlier, right? If Facebook says that yes, this person does exist, I'm going to kick you to the. We're going to send you to the program. And just like Google, we do need to configure the same things: the client ID, the client secret, and the callback URL. The only difference is that the callback URL is not going to be verified. That's the only difference. But we do have to provide it. Right? We have to provide it in the request so that Facebook knows how to call us back. Okay, and same thing. We have environment variables. And if you hover, oh, it doesn't resolve it. This morning it was resolving it. You know, I was trying to people not look at my secrets, and I hovered, and it resolved the environment variable, and it displayed it. This is all great. So much for trying to protect my identity. So same thing as Google, right? We configure the Facebook strategy, providing the config that it's this object here, right? And then the Facebook strategy is this function handled down here. We look up the user by Facebook ID. So notice that we have two new functions in the model, right? One that searches by Google ID, the other one searches by Facebook ID. And this is going to check to see if that ID matches. The profile that comes back from Facebook, the ID, it's the same. That part is the same, right? In Google and on Facebook. On Facebook, we get a display name instead of the given name and the surname. You get a display name. So what I did, I split the display name into parts, right? And I grabbed the first part as the first name and the last one as the last name. So if you have two first names and two last names, you're screwed. This would not work. You would have to figure it out. Although I believe if you change the scope, yeah, I think it's because I'm only asking for the email. But I think if you ask for the profile and ask for more things, Facebook would respond with similar information that can be retrieved. Anyway, I'm grabbing it from the display name, which happens to be my first name, middle initial, and last name. I grab the email and I update, and then I insert the profile into the database. Okay, makes sense. Very similar, right? And that's the point of using PassportJS, right? That we get a consistent API that allows us to talk to many different authentication providers in a predictable manner. All right, makes sense. All right. All right. So what I wanted to chat about is the encrypting the password when we create the user, right? So right now, the password that we create when we use the local strategy, right? That password was being stored in clear text, right? Whatever password we wrote, right? That's what we were storing in the database, right? This would allow others that have access to that database to see our password, right? And that's insecure, right? We don't want anyone to look at our password and be able to log in ourselves, right? Not even the admin users, right? So what we're going to do is that when we create the user, when we register, or even when the admin creates that user, we're going to take that password and we're going to encrypt it, right? And it's going to be a one-way encryption, meaning not ever retrieve the original password. Okay. Then the question is, well, then how do you validate next time that you try whether the password is the password, right? So the way we're going to do is that next time when you try and log in, the password you give us, we'll encrypt it again, right? And we'll compare it with the password that is stored in the database, right? If they match, then the passwords must be good, right? If they don't match, then it's not here. So to do this, we're going to use a Node.js module. It's a very simple module. It's called bcrypt Node.js. Right? Again, when you install it, -- save. Don't forget that, right? And please verify that the module has installed and there's an entry in the package.json file. Okay. So once you've installed the package, right, you'll need to require it wherever you're going to use it, right? We're going to use it in the same place where we're handling all user registration and login, right? Which happens to be the same web service that our passport is being handled. Okay. Now it has nothing to do with passport, right? You can use this independently of passport. Okay. anything that you would need to encrypt, you can use this to encrypt your data. Okay? We're going to be using it specifically to encrypt the password when you are using the local strategy. Right? In the other strategies, there is no password. Right? Authenticate, you have it to Google asks you for your password, right? Or Facebook asks you for the password, right? Us in our database, when you log in as with a third-party authority, we never see that password. Like, we don't know what that is. Okay. This only makes sense in the local strategy, right? Where you are providing the username and password, right? And we need to be responsible how we handle that password. Right? So we're going to use this bcrypt module. Right? So when you're going to create the user, when you're going to store the user in the database, right? And you get the password from the request, from the body, right? From the credentials that they submitted when they submitted the form. Right? Now we have the password. Here in our code, we're going to use bcrypt hash sync, right? That is going to apply a hash on that string. And it's going to give us a hash that cannot be deciphered, right? So we update, we replace our old password, we replace it with a new password. All right, now we have password, and then we could just store the object into a database. We can create the user where the password attribute has now been encrypted. It will be stored in the database as encrypted. And notice that it says hash sync. So hash sync, like the name suggests, is a synchronous call. Right? So we're treating it as a function call. Right? But there's another version which is asynchronous. Right? The hash might take a while, right? It might take half a second or something, right? And we don't want to, if you have thousands of users registering, which is great, we don't want to multiply, half a second times thousands and having, bogging down our single thread, trying to handle thousands of these requests. So there's another version of this which is asynchronous, right? Where the thread, our single thread, doesn't wait. Just calls a hash, this hash function, and it just keeps going on to the next one, to the next request, and to the next request, right? Eventually, the hash will come back and say, hey, here's the hashed function string, right? And then we can continue storing it in the database and whatnot. Yes. So there's an equivalent compare function that allows us to take an incoming, same way that when people are logging in, right? You have an incoming login request, the username and password, right? And we need to see if this person exists, right? If their username and password are good. So the password that they sent over, right, was parsed by Passport. Passport retrieved that username and password from the incoming request, right? So this is the very first time in our code, right, that we get a hold of this username and password. Right? We haven't had a chance to, before this, to look at that password. Yes? So we already have the password in clear text in our code. Right? So we need to look up that user. So there's two ways that you could do it, right? You could, now that you have the password, you can hash it, right, with a compare. Well, actually, we can't, right? Can we? Because you'll notice that it has to happen after we have the password, right? So we have to first look up this person by username, right? Not by username and password, by username, right? And check to see, okay, and now I have the user, and I have the password, but that password is hashed, right? I don't know what it is, right? The password that I retrieved from the database. So what we're going to do is that we're going to compare the password that came from Passport, which was when you logged in, right? We're gonna pass that in, and we want to compare it with the hashed version. So this is a hashed version that is coming from the database. And we want to compare it with a password that's coming from the form, right? So this compare function is going to hash the password that is coming from the server, right? And it's going to compare it against the password that is coming from the database, right? And it's going to return true or false. So what we're going to do here is we're going to check to see if there's a user, and so if the user exists, meaning there is somebody with that username, right? And the password that you passed me is the same as the password that was stored in the database, then I'm good, right? I'm going to return, I'm going to log you in, right? Or I'm going to fail you, right? And you going back to the login, right? So let me show you that this is indeed happening. Okay. So if I go to Web App Maker and I log out, and I want to register. Okay, this I didn't have a register last time around. So to demo this, I needed to add a register function. So here we can step through this. Let me start. And register. So maybe I want to register as Dan Marino. Dan Marino. I register, and oh, I'm in the client still. In the client. Let's say okay. So there I am. There I am in the on the server side, and I have the information for the developer information here in clear text. Debug. Let's say next. So the developer has in there the username and password. Okay. We're going to see if that user exists, right? So we're going to come here. And it says that the user is null. So here it says if the user does exist, I'm going to return null, meaning I'm not going to let you register because that person already exists. Okay, and notice that I'm looking them up by username, right? So if they don't exist, I'm going to come here and say next. And password right now is clear text, right? It's just Marino. If I say okay, keep going, it's going to take a little while. Notice how long it takes, right? It comes back, and now when I look at the password, it's some encrypted value there, right? And then we're gonna return this, and let's go back to the server, to the Mongo, and do a find. You'll notice that here's Dan. Here's Dan, right? And notice that the password has been encrypted. Before, when we weren't encrypting, right, the password was being stored in plain text. Okay. So when we try to log in next time, right, in the login, that would be on the local strategy. Here's the local strategy. It's going to come in through here, and then I want to log in, saying Dan. I say I put some other password, right? Not Marino. So try to log in is going to find the user here. And so the user does exist. And notice that it retrieves a user password. There it is, user password. It's going to compare. It's going to do an encrypt compare. So it's going to compare the password that's coming in, which is whatever I type there, the garbage that I type. It's going to compare it with this encrypted password. Right? It's going to encrypt my incoming password, and it's going to turn true or false. So okay, it was false. So they didn't match, and it's going to come false. Okay, it kicks me back to the login page. Doesn't let me go through. If instead I type in Marino and log in, again, it finds a user. It has to retrieve the password, encrypted password. And so it has now my password, Marino, and the encrypted password is going to compare it using the hash. This time, it returns true. It returns true, and it logs me in. Right, and it lets me through to my profile. Make sense? So yeah, feel free to please use this for your project, for the assignment. I don't believe the assignment specifically asks you to encrypt, does it? It does? Yeah. Awesome. All right, so yeah, use bcrypt for the module to do this. 3 or 4 lines of code. All right. All right. Okay, let's take a quick break, and then I'd like to demo a couple of features that a lot of you have asked me, and I've enhanced my my application to show you how to implement several of these features. Okay. All right.
मैंने वो लिखा कि आपका टेक्निकल एरर यहाँ पे स्टैटिक वर्ड में ना लगता है लॉजिक तो गया फिर वो ना किया जीरो जगह पर
जो उनको दिया था सॉल्व करने के लिए जो उसमें वो साइड
ये ना
यस
मैं ये सॉल्व ही कर रहा हूँ मैं लिखा नहीं है जैसे फिर भी मैं अब देख ये वाला सिंपल
वो केवल चीज आप एक करते हुए बता सकते हैं
मैं सीख तो सकती हूँ ना बोला इट नॉट रिक्वायर्ड
सीखे सब के टू जावा ही के टू देखो गाइस
तो इससे पता लगे सिंपल है राइट लाइन
और फिर ओपन में से डब्ल्यूसी उसका ये भी करके जनरेट
ये हुआ
वही बोल रहा हूँ। मैं तो एक बार ही यूज नहीं किया। हाँ तो next second मुझे you see my मतलब बैटरी की भी reaction पुढे की जाता
All right, let's continue. All right, so one of the features that some of you were asking was that you wanted to be able to have users type in either reviews using a WYSIWYG editor plugin. And most of you, I pointed you to one particular plugin that was friendly to Angular. And there's tons of them out there, right? But not all of them are friendly with Angular. Right? They're either jQuery plugins or plain old JavaScript plugins, and they don't play nice with the Angular MVC, right? Please. So I like to demo an example here that actually let me clear out the database so I can show you. So I'm going to remove everything. So I'm going to say I'm going to remove 2 and to do. I just point this on a database, huh? Application and developer. Okay, so I'm going to log out and I'm going to start. Uh-oh. Restart the server. I'll start it in debug mode. Okay, there we are. So first I'm going to log into Google. And this is the information that I have from Google. If I go into my database, oops, and show the developers, well, I have that one user, right? That one Google user, Jose Annunziato Giannuzzi, right? And let's create an application that demos this new feature, right? So say I want to create a blog, right? And so a blogging app. And one of the things that you should be able to do is to create a post, right? So here you can say that I want to create a page that allows me to create my post, or like create post, right? And in that page, I might want to add maybe a header saying, create post. And I'll say new post. And then below that, maybe the title of the post, the text input. And this is maybe no text, and just have a placeholder title. I should have a label above this, right? So let me create a label, and it just says title. And I did fix the sorting, so the sorting does work. The database is sorting correctly. So please take a look at how I fixed it. I believe I copied you a link to a commit that fixed it over the weekend on Piazza. So go back to that commit, and it shows you what needs to be fixed, right? What else? The body. Then you maybe a label for the body of the post, and then maybe a text area of maybe 5 rows that content of the post. So there it is, and then maybe a button that you can click on to post, right? So say post. So this says post. Style, maybe primary, and that's it. So there it is. So this is what the user would see. You can preview it. I can click on preview, and it shows you what the user would see. This is a page that they would see. And so this is a text area. This is a normal text area. And some of you asked me, well, what if I want to make this, people want to be able to style it, right? And use bold and italic, or full-blown HTML editor. Was that I'm going to remove this, right? And instead, I'm going to add a new widget that I created, which I call HTML, right? So HTML is going to be a widget that people can style their content as they like, right? So if I click on HTML, you get a full-blown HTML editor. I mean, you can configure how much you want the styling and what the toolbar looks like, or when does it show up, right? Maybe it should show up only when you click on the text area, or maybe you should hover, right? Or maybe not so many controls, right? So if I say OK, oh wait a minute, what happened? Did I add it? Did I add it? Wait a minute. Oh, here it is. You can actually add content, right? So here, oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm using it so that the developer can enter text into this, not somebody outside who can post their own thing, right? So me as a developer, when I have a piece of HTML that I want to paste here, or I want to format and add all sorts of things here, right? So I want to go to lorem ipsum, perhaps. I can grab text, right, and paste it in here. Notice that it maintains the styling, right, from the HTML that I grabbed. I can justify it in different ways. I can justify left, justify right, or center it. I can do right, indentation. I can also stylize different things, as in underline, italic, bold, and strike through. Right? I can add Also, bullets to the left. Okay, so this is a bullet. So item 2, item 3. And when you say OK, right, it's added to the content, right? It's added to the content. So I wanted to show you how to implement that, right? So to implement it, I went to this website, which some of you I posted the where to go to, and it's a fairly complete plugin, an Angular-friendly plugin that allows you to implement this WYSIWYG. Another cool thing is that if you edit it, you can also look at the HTML. Okay, so this is the HTML that it generates. You copy HTML and just paste it in here, right? Which is somewhat dangerous, right? That you're allowing someone to to paste HTML there. So that's why we need to use the $SCE content escaping service that Angular provides, which we used last week. I thought we did. Didn't we use it last week to escape URLs for the videos? Okay, so I did demo that last week, right? What about images? Did I demo uploading images?
Yes.
I did. Okay, great. There's one of you who was asking me. He's gone. He's not here. Right. That I did demo. I thought he was confusing me. I thought I did. Anyway, so let me show you real quick how to implement it. So this is in the editor. So the widget appears in the editor, right? In the widget editor. So let's go look at the code for the widget editor. So the widget editor is available here in the views widget edit, right? And the widget edit renders a whole bunch of widgets, right? Including this widget. It's a brand new widget. It's a text Angular widget, which is somewhere here. It appears when it's HTML. There it is, HTML. Right, if it's HTML, right, it renders a div with this particular directive. See that? Right. So that directive, just that directive, right, renders this div into an editable piece of HTML, right? And we bind it. We bind the value of the text, right, the HTML that is being rendered, we bind it to this in the model, right? Model.widget.html.text, right? And so it's going to take this text, it's going to store it verbatim in the database as HTML. If we go back and look at this in the database, that's the user. But if we look at the application, you'll notice that the HTML is verbatim copied into the HTML string attribute, which we then need to retrieve and then render back when we view the widget, right? So when we view the widget, which is when we say OK, right, we go back to the page. Right, the page again iterates over all the widgets, right? And when it gets to this widget, that might be insecure, right? Might be bad HTML, right? It needs to render that, right? So to do that, in the widget list, right, that just renders all the widgets, iterates over all the widgets. For the HTML widget, when it gets to it, to render it, we have a div, a blank div, and we use the attribute, the Angular attribute ng bind HTML, meaning the value that I'm going to give you is not any text, and it's not any piece of text or an object. Right? It's a string that should be interpreted as HTML. Okay? Meaning I'm asking you to render this and add it to the DOM. I'm asking you to add it to the DOM, which is dangerous, right? Because that HTML that I pasted in there might include all sorts of links to other CSS, other JavaScript, right? Maybe an older version of Angular, which collides with my version of Angular, right? And then it screws up my application because it's using some weird libraries, right? Or is not good, right? Or some script that, because I'm loading, I'm making it trustworthy. You know, I'll be listening to my key presses, right? And sending information back to the server from where it was downloaded. So it's dangerous, right? Just allowing people to paste stuff in here. Anyway, that is why we need to specifically tell Angular that we trust this HTML. It's okay, right? By default, Angular will not let you bind HTML verbatim like that. Right? So what I did is I created a function that lives in the controller of this page that is called trust as HTML. Right? We give it the text, right? We give it the text, the raw text, right? And in the controller, in the widget list controller, yeah, that's there. In the widget list controller, I declare that function, and who's calling it? Right, the template is calling it, right? The template, the ng bind HTML attribute, Angular attribute, is calling this function, and in that function, I'm using content escaping service, right? I'm saying, hey, that HTML you just gave me, yes, I trust it. It's okay, right? But we have to explicitly do this so that Angular trusts it, right? And then it gets rendered, as HTML. Make sense? The only other thing that I want to point out, obviously, this service needs to be injected into the controller, right? And also that text Angular library, it's several libraries. It's 3 libraries actually, 3 libraries. Okay? So if you download it, you need to install 3 libraries. Right? They depend on each other. And what else? And it has its own CSS. Right, so you'll need to download its CSS. It uses it to paint the buttons, right? The icons. For the icons, it uses Font Awesome. Right, so you'll need to install Font Awesome as well in the library. Font Awesome. What else? The only other thing is that in the app, the directive. That directive lives in a module, its own module. It's declared its own module, and so you need to declare that module as a dependency to your Angular application. So in your Angular application, list the text Angular module. All right, make sense? We did that a couple like a month ago or 2. We created our own directive and we loaded it in, right? Remember that? Well, here it is. All right. Okay. The other feature that many of you have asked me is the doing regular expression searches on MongoDB, and also drop downs where you do an autofill or a complete. Like as you type, right, is a listing, the matches of what you type. Right? Now it's very easy to do it on the client side. You're providing a static subset of a list, right? Maybe the months, right? As you type the month or the states of the United States, right? But what if you have a very long list, right? If you have a very long list, you don't want to do this on the client, right? Instead, you want to do it on the server. So the server might have information about hundreds of users, hundreds of applications, right? And you want to be able to search the information that has stored in the database, right? To have things such as, for instance, here's my application, I added a share button. I added a share button, right? And it says, here's an application. I want to share this application with someone else, right? And so in this one allows me to search users, right? Although I think I only have one user. So let me add more users so that this becomes a little more realistic, right? So let me go back and let me log out and create some more users. So I'll register Bob. Then let me log out. I'll register Charlie. Log out and register Dan. Okay, so here's Dan. Oh, Dan has no application. So who had an application? Janunzi, right? Yeah. Log out. So I'm gonna log in as Google, I think. Okay, there we go. So I go to applications and I go to the settings for my application. I can click on share, and now here I can search for other developers that I want to share with, right? So as I type, I would like to find other users, right? So for instance, if I type Bob, right? So Bob comes up. Well, I only have one person who started, right? But if I had many other users that started with BO, right, I would see them listed here. Okay. So I can select Bob, and I can click add. Right. So I have Bob, and I can then unshare from Bob. What about Charlie? Okay, here's Charlie. I can add Charlie. And so what I'd like to show you is what's happening here in the back end. Let me show you the what's happening on the network here. So let me clear this. So so let me clear that. So in the network, as I type, what's happening here, for every keystroke that I type on the input field, it's making a request. It's making a request. Right? It's asking the server that, hey, does this pattern match anybody in the database? Right? Does CHA pattern match anybody? And the server responds with, well, yes. Right? It pattern matches. It comes back with an array of saying that it pattern matches with this particular user, right? With the password. That's fine because it's gibberish, right? And it matches this Charlie here. Okay. Right. So if I keep typing, right, it keeps sending me who matches. So I'd like to show you two things. One, configuring this new directive. This is another directive, right? And also I'd like to show you on the server side how do you pattern match the incoming request with the database. So on the client side, I used a plugin, right, that is called Angular. Angular, so it's Angular Complete, right? Which I have the page up here, Angular Complete, right? It's an Angular-friendly autocomplete, right? That can work exclusively on the client, Or it could go also to the server and retrieve things from the server. But you need to configure it if it's on the server. So let me show you how it's configured on my application. So first I downloaded Autocomplete alt.min. And then I updated my app.js to load the library as a dependency to my project. Okay, this loads the directive. Then in my page, this in this case would be my share page, right? It's my I'm here. Where am I? This is my share page. My share page is, where is it? I'm sharing an application. So there it is, application. There is application share. So if I double click on that, right, the directive is being used right here. There it is. This is the directive. So this is the div. This is the DOM, right, where the directive is going to paint the input field, the text, whatnot. So by default, the Angular directive renders just a plain old text field, a single line text field. What I did is I put it inside of an input group. This is a bootstrap class that allows me to tag at the end of the input field. It allows me to add a button that is flush. It's nice and flush, right? So that they appear one after another. So it looks like this. See that you have the text field and then you have the button right on the right-hand side. It allows you to tag along a whole bunch of buttons if you want, right? So that it's nice and flush and looks really, really nice. Okay. So for the directive, I configured it. You can configure it to go fetch the data at this particular URL. So you can tell it, where is it? You can point it to anything you want. You can point it to Wikipedia, to CNN, to anything that you know is an API that will respond with some array, right? You can point it to IMDb. Remember the search that we did a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago? This would be very easy. You point it to imdbid.com/s, I think it was S, was it S? Right? And then it appends to that URL, it appends the whatever you type. Right? It sends it over. It expects an array to come back. Right? Now that array would contain lots of things. Right? So you need to tell it, object that comes back in the array. The array is going to have lots of objects, right? You need to tell it, what do you want me to show in that object, right? It'll have movie titles, actors, it'll have directors, it'll have ratings, it'll have, what do you want me to show? It'll have a plot, you want me to show the plot? So no, I tell it, I want you to show the username, right? So that matches this in the object that are coming back, this field. You need to tell it the field that you want to show. That's why Charlie shows up, right? That's why Charlie shows up. And then you need to tell it, when the person clicks and selects one of these from the drop downs, right? Where do you want me to put the selected object? I need to how that you've selected this object. So when I select it and I say, and I tell it to add it to the current scope, in a variable called selected user. I can put whatever I want there, right? But now it's going to be available in the scope, right? So that when I click on the button, when I click on this and this button here, the user will have it already. I can tell the model, I can tell my controller, hey, right? The selected user is in this object, and you can get the original object that was used to render this, right? The part that has a whole bunch of meta information, the position in the scroll, how many elements came back. It has a lot of meta information about when you clicked on it, right? It was the third in 100. It has a lot of meta information. One of the things that you can extract is the original object, right, that was used to render this dropdown. Okay, and that's what I sent back to the model, and then I go to the server and the database and whatever. So that's I'm not going to cover that. Right? That's just MongoDB. Yes.
This is a quick question that every time we type keystroke is made, we make a request.
Yes.
So that would be like unnecessary request if my search field is very concentrated. Let's say I just need to explore places, right?
Yeah.
So why can't we just bring the all possible places first to a front end and then populate it?
Right. So if it's a small set, then you can cache it on the client, right? But if it's something big, that's thousands of elements, right? You would have to cache that, break it down, and have the client memory, right, remember all those things, right? So for performance reasons, you might want to do that, right? You don't want to include the server, and if it's a small enough list, then yes, sure. Maybe the list of states, right? That might be a good thing to just cache it. Do one query, right, and just have it there forever, right? As long as the session is going. But if it's something that is too big, then it's preferable to just do it on the server. Okay?
But then we would make unnecessary requests.
Well, they're not unnecessary, right? If it fulfills the use case, it's not unnecessary.
But then still, if we type something, if the user types a lot of characters,
yeah,
then it's still making a lot of requests. And
yes, well, hopefully when they see that it's in the dropdown, they select it, right? They're not just writing, right? Hopefully they see it in the dropdown and say, oh, there it is, and they select it. They stop typing. So hopefully they, with the first 3-4 characters, they already see what they're looking for, right? And then they select it. They would keep typing if they don't find it, right? Can't find it. Then the issue is that the way you're searching on the server might not be appropriate, right? That the criteria, whatever you're typing, right? Whatever algorithm you're finding to try to retrieve what you think the person wants might not be smart enough, right? Right now, I'm just using a regex, right? But Google does all sorts of AI kind of stuff, right? Right? It's trying to figure out where you are, what other people have looked at before. Using a whole bunch. I mean, the other day I was at Best Buy, right? I was looking at television in front of me, and I'm going to try online. I typed the first character, and the TV came up. Okay, I mean, how scary is that? Okay, I mean, that's how good these folks are, right? They're crowdsourcing lots of things, a geoposition, right, of where this was searched at. Other people who have stopped there and searched for the same thing, right? And I mean, their algorithms. So I mean, we're using something simple as just regex. But if you're trying to pattern match billions of pages, right? That's not an appropriate way of doing it, right? I mean, that's where the power is of creating their indexing is just amazing, of crowdsourcing all this stuff. So let me just show you my lowly regex implementation. So yeah, so all these are going to the server, right? And so on the server, I'm looking for a developer. So I put it in the developer service, right? Because I already had stuff in there that searched for the service for the developers and created developers. So in my developer service, I'm listening for those incoming searches, right? Which is right here. It's API developer search, right? That's what the Angular directive is generating, right? These requests, right? And at the end, it's tagging along, right? It's tagging the, some text that, for me, I'm expecting usernames. That's my criteria, right? I'm expecting usernames. Google doesn't expect anything, right? You can type whatever you want, right? So free form, and as you type, it tries to understand what it is that you're saying, right? Anyway, so I'm just doing just username, right? So if I go to a search developer, I'm just gonna pass this along to a model that's gonna do the regular expression search. If I go in there into the model, it's implemented here, and so what it's doing this right now. So it's doing a dot find, right? I'm not gonna find because it's not necessarily pattern matches, right? You haven't typed it all. So it's a regular expression. So what this does, I'm using a regex operator. This is a standard regular expression operator on MongoDB, right? That is going to try and pattern match this text that you type against the username field of all the developers. So this is just iterating over all the developers, searching to see which one matched. Very expensive, right? And you can pass all sorts of options. I pass the I option. It's a very common option. It's case insensitive. So I don't care what the case they type. Even more expensive, right? So yeah, so this is just using regular MongoDB regular expression, and it comes back. Find returns as by default an array, and that array is an array of developers, and send it back for rendering. Yes. Very yes. Okay. Let's see, a couple of other features. My notes in GitHub web app maker commits. Oh, MongoJS. I like to cover that. Add a page, say the bind a template with the wig editor. Page template. Sortable. I fixed sortable. Just really quick, the way I fixed the sortable. So because I didn't provide you with an appropriate implementation of sortable, I'm not gonna write that piece for the last assignment, assignment 4. I am expecting that you can sort on the client, right? But I'm not going to expect that you manipulate the model on the database, right? Because I gave you a less than optimal implementation. That I should have given you. On the it's implemented here, or did I put it here? Sort. Sortable. Yeah, fixed sortable pages. Yeah, so where is it? Let me see. Sort page data, page control, the list, directive. Sortable. Sortable pages, sortable widgets. Is it here? Okay, there it is. Yeah. So this is what happens here. Okay, so what's happening here is that I get the application where I'm sorting, right? The application, then the page, and then the page has a list of widgets, right? And I would like to be able to move the widget up and down, right? So what I get here is when the sorting completes, I pass to the service the ID of the application, the ID of the page, and then the beginning and the end index of the widget, where it was and then where it ends, right? And to move them around, what I do is that I first find the application, right? Remember that the pages are inside of the application and the widgets are inside of the page, right? They're all embedded inside of each other. So it always starts from the application, right? With the application ID, I find the application object. Once I have the application object, I can then navigate to the page, to the particular page, using pages.id. Pages is an array, right? It's an array of pages. Application is just a whole bunch of pages, right? And then this retrieves me that one page. And I can keep navigating, right, inside of the array, right? Array within array within array, by the IDs. But here, I only want to get back to the widgets, right? Because this is an array of all the widgets, and that's what I want to sort. That's what I want to move, right? It's the array of widgets. So what I do is that I from that array, I'm going to splice. I'm going to remove the element at start index 1. So I'm going to remove it from the array. So now it no longer is in the array. Now splice returns, when you remove something from an array, it returns another array. The array of elements that you removed. Okay, because here it's 1, right? I'm removing only 1, but I could have removed 2 or 3 or 4. I could remove any number, right? Starting at start index. So I know I only removed 1, so I really want the only one that I just removed, because I want to put it back into the same array, but at a different position, right? So to do that, I use splice again on the same array. On the same array, I'm going to splice it back in, but at a different position, at another position and index. And 0, because I am not removing anything. 0 means this is an insertion. It means insert. And that works. That works. I need to mark the element in the application that was modified, right? Because the underlying ORM, right, Mongoose, it will not consider moving things around an array as a modification in the model, right? So it would not save. It would not save. So I need to mark it and explicitly tell it that yes, you are dirty. You need to synchronize with, right? Go back and save yourself. So this save would be completely ignored, right? It would be ignored if I didn't mark it as dirty. Okay. All right. All right. That works. So another feature that I added that I'd like to demo for you is the following. So say I'm in an application, and say I want to create an address book, right, where people can enter their contact information, right? This is okay. Now this was another student that was yesterday morning. Some folks were saying, well, some folks were telling me Mongoose is too restrictive. Yeah, you lose all the great things that MongoDB brings you. That you have this elastic schema, right? That you can store anything you want, right? Mongoose, forces you to stick to a schema, right? They said here you have to declare a schema, and then if the JSON data that comes in doesn't match that schema, it's just not saved. A lot of you were asking me, what if I want to modify the schema on the fly? Right? What if I want native access to MongoDB? Right? So I did that. There's another library instead of Mongoose. There's another library. Well, there's several. There's a whole bunch of them. But one in particular, MongoJS. MongoJS is a lower level library that allows you to talk to MongoDB, at the basic level, right? It doesn't do any validation. Any data that you give it, any JSON that you give it, it won't do any. It doesn't care, right? It will just pump that JSON into a record in MongoDB. Okay, and in some cases that's you want that, right? You want the flexibility that MongoDB gives you, right? So here's an example. Right now, my application is fairly structured, right? You have users that have applications, that have pages, that have widgets, right? But say I create a form, right? Like the forms we've been creating in the homework, and I want actually people to use those forms and fill them out, right? And store them in a database, right? There are several ways that we could go about it. Using a relational database, I could use a very denormalized, very denormalized schema, right? Where I basically have almost like a hash table, right? That says, field, this is what you submitted. For this field, this is what you submitted. Right? It's very, very flat. All the data for everybody just lives on the same table. Right? JSON allows us, or MongoDB allows us to go a little bit further, right? Because it allows us to have any field, right? Your fields can change from time to time, right? You can add fields, remove fields. It doesn't care, right? It could be objects. You can store entire objects as opposed to just a flat schema. Okay, so let me show you. So say I want to create a. First, let's go here and see that show collections. Why do I have contacts? Oh, I didn't drop them. Maybe that. Okay, let me drop the entire collection. And here, that's it. Okay, I'm going to show the collections. Okay, so it's not there. Contact is not there. So I would like to create an address book where I can enter all my contacts, right? And my contacts are going to have several fields: first name, last name, phone, address, and whatnot. So would it be great if I could create on the fly? I could create a table that had a schema that I could store the information in a structured environment, in a structured manner. That would have fields, first, net, last, and so on and so forth. Okay. The relational database, it would be much harder, right? You would have to have something that's extremely flat, something where. But this one in JSON, you have so much more capabilities, right? So, for instance, let me create here my address book app. Say OK. So my address book should allow me to have a couple of pages. One of the pages should allow me to list all my contacts, right? Maybe alphabetically, and then maybe it can sort. Maybe it has search capabilities. Maybe it has all that kind of stuff. But at least it should just show everything, right? So I'll call this. Okay. And another page should allow me to enter and create new contacts. Right? So let's create a page that allows me to enter my contacts. So contact. Okay. All right. So let's go into one of these pages. The contact page. Let's add a header that's. The text will be contact. It's a header, or create contact. Create new contact. Okay. And it'll have a couple of labels here. Maybe a label that says, this says first name. It'll have an input field that will have text, maybe a placeholder giving an example of what we're expecting. John. I'm going to give it a name. Right? That name is crucial, right? That's the name I'm going to use as a field when I enter and introduce and insert this record into the database. Right? Okay, so here's John. I create another I create another label for maybe for the last name. Okay, and then enter maybe an input field below, no text, and the placeholder is Smith, right? And the name I'm going to say last. Okay. Right. Then what I like to be able to do is say okay or save or done or something, right? That says I'm done creating, or I'll say maybe a button that says create, a button that says create contact or save contact, save contact. I can style it as a primary or maybe success green. That's okay. So there it is, right? If I want to see what the page looks like, I can say, I can preview it. And this is what they would see on the phone or on the small screen. Notice I had to add an X there to say that I'm done previewing this. I can go back to my editor. Okay, but right now it doesn't do anything, right? I click on the save and nothing happens, right? All right. So what I like to be able to do is that when I save, what should happen when it saves? Well, one of the typical things that we do is that when we add something, we want to see the result of having add something, right? So just like when we add a new page, right? When we add a new page, we say add, right? We go to a page that tells us, okay, what do you want to add? And I say, home page. When I say okay, meaning I'm done, I'm creating it, save this, the typical navigation is that, well, go back to the list of the things that you're creating, right? So let's try and follow that same logic, right? If I'm done creating a contact, I should go back to the list of all the contacts, right? So if I go back into the contact, right, I can configure the button. You can configure the button that when I'm done creating this, I like to be able to navigate to the contact list. Right? If I say okay, in the preview, it doesn't work. Preview is only to see what it renders like, the layout, how it looks like. But notice I added a run that says, okay, make this live, right? As if what would it behave if this were actually running. So it renders the same as a preview, right? Well, the only difference is that this button now actually works, right? It does what it's supposed to do. If I click on Save Contact, it goes somewhere. Where is it going? Presumably the contact list page, right? But I believe the contact list page is currently blank, right? So let's go in and edit that page, and let's try this again, right? So let's go back to my address book page. So in the contact list, I'm going to add a header. I'm going to say this is my contact list, right? Something that I would need here is a button that says button or something, right? For now, just we'll just create a button, right? So we'll say plus, and I'll say a button, and the button will say create new contact. I'll make it blue. And I want to navigate to the contact page, the other page, right? The contact page. So I'll say OK. Right? I now should have both pages connected to one another. This should allow me to go add a contact, and then when I add it, it should come back here and list those contacts, right? So if I create new contact, it goes to the create new contact page, right? If I say save, right, it goes back to the contact list. But right now, nothing is happening, right? When I click on save, nothing is actually being saved. Right? So let's add that ability. Right? So if I go back to the contact list, you'll notice that in the button, right, I can configure, okay, this is broken. This is supposed to stay selected. This is supposed to stay as contact list. Anyway, down below I have a drop down that allows me to do some database actions. Okay? What do you want to do when you click on this button? right? I want to insert. What is it that you're inserting? I want to insert everything that I've typed in this form. Okay. One of the things that it should allow me to do is says, well, okay, I can figure out that you have a first and a last, right? I can navigate and iterate over those input fields, right? I can extract their first name and last name. Where do you want to put it? Right? Where, in what collection do you want to put it? Right? In what table do you want to put it? So what I did is that since this button lives in a page called contact, I could do two things. So one of them, I could explicitly ask them here, in an input field, what collection you want to put it in, right? Or I can derive that. I can guess, right? So for instance, my guess is going to be, I'm going to take the name of the page. I'm going to take the name of the page and use that as the name of my collection, right? That's a good guess, right? It's typically has a name that it describes what it is, right? So I'll use that, right? And I'll say okay. I'll say okay. If I run this now, and I type here Alice Wonderland, right? And I click on save, right? It does navigate, but this time, not only did it navigate, right? It actually inserted something in the database. So if we go back to our Mongo, and we show the collections, you'll see now that I didn't have a contact collection, but now I do have a contact collection, right? So if I say db.contact.find, I have Alice in one way. Okay. Right. If I want to create another one, I say Bob Hope. Okay, and let me create another one, and this will be Charlie Garcia. Okay. So if I go back, if I find again, I have those 3 records back in there. Right? The last thing that I would like to be able to do is says, okay, the data is there. Right? I would love to be able to see that data. I'd like to be able to see that data. So to allow for that, right? What I did is, if I go back to the contact list, or in the contact list, I added a new widget. I added a widget that allows you to query that data back. Right? So for instance, if I say plus, I added a data table. Anybody played with a data table before? This is starting to look very much like a toolbar in Visual Studio, right? Or one of these IDEs where typically you drag and drop your form elements, right? And all these widgets have all these powerful things, and you can configure them in a properties sheet, right? So the data table is a very common widget in some of these powerful IDEs, and I was inspired by it, having used it for a couple of years, where you can say in the property sheet of those data tables, you can say, hey, there's this table in the database that has some data, right? It has a schema and whatnot. Go out and discover the schema of that table, right? And build me an HTML table that has all the data, right, from that table. Right? I'll provide you some properties. Maybe I can say that I only want certain fields, not all the fields. Right? I don't want the ID field. I don't want any foreign keys. I don't want that, right? Maybe I can also provide some formatting, right? I want you to format dates as dates, numbers as numbers, and strings and whatnot. I can configure that. I didn't go that far, but here what I did do is that I can say what collection, right? And I know the collection was based on the name of the page, so I can do this. I can collect and say, well, it's a contact. The collection is called contact. That's the name of the table, right? Now, I think that one feature that would be nice here is that this could go out to the database, right? Or have it somewhere in some metadata that fields of that collection as first and last. Right? I need to do that. you have to actually type the fields that you want. So I'm going to do first, comma, last. Okay. So those are the fields in that collection, right? So if I say OK, right, it renders for me a sample of what the table will look like. Right? This is not the real table, right? But it will look something like this, where you will have these columns based on the names of the fields, and there's 3 dummy rows, empty rows, right? Although if you run it, it actually does the query, right? It actually goes out, right, and connects to the database to that particular collection, right, and it retrieves all the objects. And as it iterates over those objects, right, it looks at the fields that I had configured, it pattern matches them, right? It says, oh, first and first, okay, so I'll show the first and so forth, right? Right, and so this totally works, right? I can go to create new contact, right, and I can create another one, Dan Marino, save contact. And notice I come back and it requeries and it shows the data. So yeah, so just with a couple of clicks and drags, we were able to build very, very simple data entry applications. And certainly you can extrapolate from this that you can do other things that the data table can do. Right? The data table, for instance, you can configure that these records are deletable. I want to be able to delete these, or editable, right? So that if you click, it draws an X next to each one of these, so that you can click, right, and poof, it's gone. Or that allows you to add an edit link or an edit button, so that when you click on the edit button, the fields become editable, and I can edit in place. I mean, it could become so much more, right? The next thing that I'm thinking of doing is that tables on small screens don't work very well. Right? So what I was thinking of doing is that you should be able to give me a template, an HTML template, anything, right? And you're very much like an Angular template, right, where you can put placeholders, right, and it'll take that template, fill it in with the fields, right, and then copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, and it goes down. And the template could be we could create the template using text Angular. Right? We can use text Angular. So I'll add that over the weekend, right, so that it'll look very much like an Angular template. Maybe I'll use curly brackets to say where do I want the first name, where do I want the last name. Right? I can use titles. For the blog, it would be great, right? I can create a template blog that I want the title as a header, the body as a paragraph. Anyway, I'm thinking ahead of myself. Let me show you how I implemented this. Right. So first, let's look at the creation, the insertion part, right? Inserting. Right. For that, let me show you the button. Right. So the button for the button in the contact, right, this button over here, you'll notice that I can configure the navigate to page. I have to fix that, and also an action. So for that, I extended the model for the button. Right. So excuse me, in the page schema, I added. If you remember, I have. Remember, the applications contain pages. Pages contain, so applications contain an array of pages. Each page contains an array of widgets, right? And then the widget, inside of the widget, I have a denormalized schema where I store information about each type of widget that only makes sense if it's that particular type of widget. Yes. So if that widget is if the widget is a header, then only this portion matters, right? If the widget is a label, then only, I don't store anything for the label. Sorry. If it's a text, then I don't store anything. Oh yeah, here. If it's text, it's a text input. I store the placeholder and rows, right? So table. if it's a data table, I store the collection where it's being stored, right? Where am I storing this? And I also store an array of fields, right? So that I need to know that, because when I iterate over this, I need to render it first on the first, last on the last, first on the first, last on the last, as I iterate over each row. Right? So I need that. So the button when it saves, it comes back to the widget model. I think it's a widget model. Yeah. The data table, when I fill out the widget for the button, this is mapped to the navigate. Oh, I'm sorry, the collection. Sorry. Oh no, this is navigate. I'm sorry. Yeah, navigate. And then the button, the insert is tagged to the action. So the button, where's the button? Where's button? There it is. I take the button. I mapped this action. I mapped it to a field called db command. Right, so I can store in there that you want to insert, select, update, delete. Right now, there's only insert. That's the only thing that I can do. I store that in db command. This one over here, I store it in a field navigate, and I just store it. Now, what comes back, what the client is passing me is the entire page object. I don't want the entire page object. I only care about the ID of the page. I don't care about the ID. So that's what I do here. I just grab from the page object. I only grab the ID of that page. Okay. What else? Right. So that I know where I should go. Okay. So so what I want to do is this button. What I want to happen is that when you click on it, something has to happen. I need to do the command. I need to execute the command, and then I need to navigate in that order, right? I first have to execute the command. If the command is successful, then I will navigate. If I don't have a command, the database command, I'll just navigate, right? So when the button renders, when the button renders, that I do the preview or the running. When I run the button, this is being rendered in a page called page runner or page run view. And this one just, it just iterates over all the widgets, just rendering, right? Just like we've seen before. But for the button, it has to be a little bit more specific. It has to have a couple more things. For the button, right? For the button, I added this ng-click, right? I need to notify somebody. What's this? Did I do that? I need to notify the controller that the button has been created, has been clicked, right? And then the controller needs to figure out what it needs to do. It says it needs to get the button. If the button has a navigate, it needs to navigate to that page, right? Right? If it has a database command, it needs to execute the database command. Right? So the controller has this button click event handler that takes the button, right? It checks to see if indeed is a button, right? And if it has a database command. Is it a button and does it have a database command? If it's a button, but it doesn't have a database command, instead it has a navigate, right? That's pretty easy. It just says location.url, and it comes to the same page, the same page run, but it's going to render a different page, right? The only difference between rendering this page or another page is that it's rendering different IDs. Right? Notice that here, right, it has the ID of the page that it needs to render. With that ID, I can fetch all the widgets and render all the widgets, right? So I'm going to navigate to the same exact page, but I'm taking the ID of the page that I had saved in the database. So this is the ID of the page that I had saved, and that's where I'm going to go. Right, so that allows me to navigate. That allows me to click on this and just go to that other page. But if instead I have the database command, I first have to do this. I first have to do the database command, and if it's successful, if I have a navigate, I will also navigate, right? So here it is, right? If I had a database command, all the other fields, right? All the input fields, the text areas, any of those commands where people can actually type, right? I bound them to a model, to a generic model, right? I bound it to a generic model called fields, right? So when I render, so for instance, the text area, the input fields, if it's text, right? I bound them. I put them in a map. I create a map, right? Which is an object, right? It's a JSON object, right? It's a map whose attributes are the names of the fields. That's why when I created the text area, when I created the input field, I gave it a name. Remember, I gave it a name? But that's the name of the widget, right? So it's using the widget name as an index. See that? So it's dynamically creating this JSON object. That's also that's a beautiful thing in JSON in Java. In Java, you can create JSON objects on the fly, right? You can create new attributes on the fly. Very, very cool. Especially using the square bracket allows you to create these maps. Anyway, I am binding the value of whatever they type in the input field. I'm binding it to this map called fields or model fields, right? And the attributes are the names, and the values are whatever they type. Okay, so here in vm.fields, I have the object, I have the record ready to be inserted. See that? It's ready to be inserted. So I create a database service, and I provide the command. Right, the command again could be insert, delete, update. I provide the page object because the page has the name of the page, right? And that's the context. It has the name of the collection where it's supposed to be inserted. And I provide the object that I want to insert. Right? So in execute command, I check to see if the command is an insert. I'm going to do a post. If it's a delete, I'm going to do delete. Right? If it's a update, right? I'm going to do a put. Okay. Where? To an endpoint on the server that I'm going to pass the name of the page, and this is the field. So I am posting to this collection these fields. See that? And on the database, it's just an insert. Right? It's just an insert. Right. So let me show you that because that's the beauty here. In the database, we have the application services. So in services, I created a database service. So here's my database service. So here's where it's coming in, the post. You see that? That's the post. That's going to insert. Right? I handle it in this insert function. I handle it in this insert function. And here, I get the fields from the body, right? It has the record in the body. And I grab the name of the page from the parameters, right? The name of the page could be anything, right? Because users can type whatever they want for the name of the page, right? So what I do, I normalize the names. For instance, I remove all spaces. I should have made everything lowercase, but I didn't. I just kept it the same casing. But I do remove all spaces and I replace them with underscores. And here is the magic. Here is the magic. Okay, this is not. It's using MongoJS, right? It's a separate MongoDB library, where they both can talk to MongoDB, right? But this is a much lower level API, right? This one allows you, for instance, say collection page name. That is to create collections on the fly. If the collection didn't exist, create it. If it did exist, grab it. Right? So DB here, this DB is a variable. It's this variable right here. This variable was created on the server, way over here in the server, and then passed along, right? Here it is. So here's Mongoose, right, which we've covered a couple weeks ago, and now I'm introducing a okay, where did I put it? Oh yeah, thank you. MongoJS. So MongoJS is another MongoDB library, low-level MongoDB library. You need to install it like any other. So it's definitely listed in package JSON, right? So MongoJS, there it is, just alongside with Mongoose, right? And notice that it's connecting. It's same exact database. See that? It's connecting. So I have two connections to MongoDB. One coming from Mongoose that I'm using to create my application, my pages, my widgets. Yes. The other one is dynamically creating collections that users are submitting data into the forms, right? So they're both connected. So here in the I either create the collection if it didn't exist, or grab the collection if it already existed. And now that I have the collection, I can say collection.insert. This is the same exact command that you would use on MongoDB on the console, on the Mongo client. If you want to insert something, you would use this command. They followed the MongoDB API very closely. And so this API is very similar to the command lines that you would use using the Mongo client. So I insert, and fields. The fields is the object that came in with all the keys, and it's inserted, and then I respond with the document that was inserted. Very easy. Okay, no validation, no schema, no nothing. Right, very low level. A little more dangerous. Especially and for us that are coming from a structured database environment, this is madness. that you're creating records here with no schema and just putting stuff in there. But otherwise, the alternative would be a very flat, unstructured schema. So I think this is a better solution. These are objects that are being inserted, right? So the other end is retrieving this. I want to retrieve this from the data from the data table, right? The data table wants to retrieve this. So the widget, when it runs, where is it? On the page run. The widget, the is over here. So here's the data table. So the data table needs the data, right? It needs to know what the fields are. It needs to know what the rows are, right? So the data table has a couple of things that you can configure on it. And one of the things is the collection, right? Where to fetch these things, right? Page schema in the data table has a collection, right, and then the fields that you typed by hand, right? So what it does is that first it's going to use a table, just a regular table. It iterates over the fields, and then these are the names of the fields. That's how it generates the header, right? It generates the header. So no data yet. Now it needs to render over some data. What is that data? I don't know. Right? It's very generic. It could be anything. It could be a to-do list. It could be a contact list. It could be a blog. It could be blog posts. So I use a very generic data. Right? And I'm assuming that each element in that array is a single object, right? That has fields in them. Hopefully, those fields match the field that I know about, right? Hopefully. So when it iterates over that data, it's going to notice that it's going to the data for each record. So each record in that data. Then it's going to iterate. So this one iterates vertically, right? Row, 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 row. But then I need to iterate from left to right also, no, the columns. And so I'm going to iterate over all my fields. Over all my fields. I'm going to use those fields as keywords, as keys into the object of the row, right? Because the object that's coming in, they're all keyed on first, last, first, last, first, last. And those are exactly the fields that I have in my widget. So as I iterate over the fields, I use that as a key into the map of the record. Now, this data is being populated. This data needs to be populated by the controller. The controller needs to provide me the data, right? Who else? How else am I going to get the data? Right? So the page runner has a controller that provides that. And it's the page controller. The page controller has, where is it? When it starts rendering, when it fetches the page, that needs to render and fetches the widgets, right? It fetches all the widgets. As so here in the response, in the data, I have the page, and the page contains all the widgets. See that? Now I have all the widgets. And I use the widgets for rendering, right, on the client. I used to just render it. But now I'm going to do a couple more things. I'm going to iterate on the controller, looking to see if there are any widgets that need data, right? Any data tables that need data, right? So I'm looking for widgets that are data tables. Right? So it's looking for data table widgets. I find one. If I find a widget that has a data table, I'm going to use the database service to select, meaning what's the name of the data table has the collection, right, from where to get the data from, right? So I'm going to pass it to the select. I'm going to pass the collection, and it's going to go to my database servers on the server. It's going to be a get this time. It's going to be a get, right? On the same page name, and at the select, again, it normalizes the name of the page because it's going to use it as a collection. Now that I have the name of the collection, I retrieve the collection. Hopefully the collection is there, right? That somebody has inserted data into my collection. And a find. And what does find do? Find just returns all the records in my collection, which my controller retrieves here. The data here are all the records in that collection, which I then bind to my templates in data. Yes.
So when we use Mongoose, it used to validate it with the schema, right?
Yes.
Because we had a problem that if you wanted to insert a field after an object has been inserted, like updating with a field, it won't allow us to do that.
Say again?
Let's say I have a JSON object with 3 fields.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I want to add a field, so Mongoose won't allow us to do that, right? In an already existing schema.
Right.
So that's why we had to have redundant fields everywhere.
Okay.
To get the minimum out of the max.
Redundant fields?
Like you had in widgets, right? You in your schema you place everything, but you will use only the things which come to it. So
yes. Well, I mean, I could have used a more normalized schema. I mean, it was my choice to choose that. Right? I could use a nested schema or in a separate collection.
if you need to make one unified collection,
but that still would be structured, right? It would be fixed. You can't change it.
So
I could make it more, right?
Yeah. So MongoJS doesn't apply those sort of.
Yeah, MongoJS doesn't validate. Yeah.
That means that we can also update a field in that.
Yes,
right?
you can. Yeah, then you can grab the right. You can grab the application and do the whole thing with Mongo.js.
Yeah. So if in my data table I have such JSON objects as records which have different fields,
Yeah.
won't be a problem for it to.
Yes, it would be. Yes, it would be. Any of the fields that are not in the field that the data table expects would be ignored. The data table would just ignore it. And it says, well, I didn't find those fields, unless you add them to the data table, right?
They have like the first JSON object as first name, last name.
Yes.
And the second JSON object as first name, middle name, and the last name.
Exactly.
So how will it render them? Only the first name.
Exactly. So you would have to tell the data table that is a field that you know of, right? So it would render the header would render first, middle, last. For some of them, it would not have the last name, the middle one, right? So it would show empty because I don't have a data, and everyone else would have values, right? So you're going from an unstructured schema, right, where the table again wants to be structured. It wants a value for each column, right? But it doesn't have a value for each column, so it would be sparse. It would be somewhat sparse, right? So if you try to do the same thing for, if you try to render a widget, which is very sparse, right? You'll have, if it's a label, you have values for the label, right? But nothing else, right? If it's a button, you'll have values for the collection, for the text, and for whatever for the button, right? But nothing else in the rest of the record. So you're going from something that is unstructured, Mongo, to something that is very structured, which is a table. It expects one value per column, right? So that's the impedance, right, between the two ways of representing data. Right? Going from a very denormalized to a very normalized structure representation. And it's your decision on how is it that you want to display it. For instance, I would not use a table instead. Right? Instead, I would use like the iterator that we have, right? Where you have ifs, ng switch, right? And so if it's this, I do this. If it's this, I do that, right? Or it could be that I render in a panel, and the fields that don't appear, they just don't render, right? They're just completely ignored. I will only render fields that are. All right, I think I'm gonna leave it here. Yeah, I'm very excited with my toy IDE. But imagine, right? You have this IDE on your phone, right? And when you're bored in line next time, instead of playing a game on your phone, you're building an app, right? You're building a form or something that you publish. Right? I'm trying to target non-developers and trying to use something that they might. Something I like to explore now is scripting. I had a couple of students working on scripting that I'd like to see what we've done, but I'd like to be able to maybe incorporate into here. For instance, I'd like to be able to say, I'd like to be able to create maybe a calculator or something that calculates something. So I can say, this field is equal to that field plus that other field divided by this other field, right? Or I'd like to be able to do some branching, right? If this field is whatever, then that other field is something else. So that's kind of scripting, right? So I'd like to incorporate that in a while. All right, thank you.